Well, good morning. I'm Matthew Stibber. I'm CEO at Articulate Marketing, and it is Wednesday, the 8th of December, and Christmas has already started in Articulate Towers. I have my little Lego Santa there with his sack of toys, and he has a little computer, and on the computer it says "nice list." So everyone who's watching this is on my nice list. Without further ado, today we're going to be talking about thought leadership white papers. So in my life, I've probably written 200 or 300 of these things, and Articulate as an agency has written many more. So we have some insight or experience to share with you on that. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to start my presentation. There we go. So let's start off with naming of the parts. What is a white paper? Yeah, I quoted Wikipedia, so deal with it. I wouldn't quote Wikipedia in a white paper, so that's rule number one. It's an authoritative report or guide that informs readers concisely about a complex issue and presents the issuing bodies, that's yours, mine, issuing bodies' philosophy on the matter. It is meant to help readers understand an issue, solve a problem, or make a decision. And I think that is a very good description of what a white paper is. White paper is there to be useful and helpful, but convey your position, your opinion, your philosophy on the topic in question. It fits into Articulate's big purpose of inform, connect, and inspire. If you have a really good white paper, you are helping inform people. You're increasing the sum of knowledge that they have. You're helping them understand their problems and solve them. And a white paper has to offer genuine value in this respect. It isn't a sales document, and we'll come on to that in a minute. Well, it isn't a sales collateral. Important distinction. Also, typically, not always, but typically, a white paper sits behind a landing page with a form on it. So, you fill in some information and you get the valuable white paper. And although marketing has evolved quite a lot since the sort of early days of content marketing and inbound marketing, the landing page white paper combination is still very powerful as a lead magnet. So it opens that communication channel with the audience. And lastly, if you've done it really well, it creates a moment of a striking illumination, an epiphany, an inspiration for the reader that helps them really figure out what the next step is, clarify their decision, and ideally inspires them to take that next step with you. But it's not the same to say inspire as to say buy now. White papers exist in a slightly different place and at a slightly sort of parallel relationship to the sales funnel. So how do they map into that sales funnel, that buyer's journey? So you may have seen this idea of the awareness stage, the consideration stage, the decision stage. You may have heard of AIDA. Attract, convert, close is another sort of model that HubSpot used before the infamous flywheel. So at the awareness stage, people might be experiencing a problem or perceiving an opportunity, but it's a bit nebulous. Do I want a swimming pool in my garden? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Do I want a new cloud-based IT system? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Should I move my SAP workloads into the cloud or keep them on-prem? I don't know. There's some sort of issue opportunity problem. So lots of topics like how your current situation isn't working anymore, reasons why you need to think about doing something different, the ultimate guide to benchmarking reports. These are very good at the awareness stage, the top of funnel, the attract stage, if you like, maybe more like the convert stage, because you're trying to get people to fill in a form. So these awareness stage white papers are really talking to readers about their issues in their language and only slightly talking about your products and services in your language. 90-10 probably is the right proportion. So in the consideration stage, maybe you're at that, you're going, okay, I've definitely got to move my workloads into the cloud, for example. How do I do it? What are my options? How do I explore that? How do I define that? And this is really where white papers are very powerful, because you can bring your expert opinion, expert advice, expert guidance to people when they're weighing up their options. So how to solve, how to do, how is a very, very powerful phrase at this point. How to build a business case for is also something that's relevant, especially with large decision-making units in organizations. If like there's 8 stakeholders and 2 executive sponsors and 3 budget holders, and you have to persuade all of them to do this, £100,000 project, £1 million project, whatever it is, you might be convinced, but you've got to persuade the others. So this building a business case style of white paper works very well. And then at that final, okay, I'm looking at 3 different providers for this. I'm looking at different swimming pool options. I want this. I don't want it to be tiled. I want it to have a plastic line or whatever. You need to clarify the decision and help guide people through to the final specification, the final details. So buyer's guides are really powerful there. Comparing option A against option B against option C. Ideally, if you supply all 3 options, that's great. But it's still valuable if you don't, and you're kind of wanting to say, we do this, but we don't do that. And this is why we think this is good. And we're not disrespecting that. That works for some people, but probably doesn't work for you. And this is why you should consider our option. A really good example of this, we did it as a webinar and a blog post, but it could have been a white paper. Should you have an in-house marketing person or hire a marketing agency? Well, obviously you should hire a marketing agency, is my opinion, but trying to present that finely balanced decision and the pros and cons of each option is a really good example of a decision stage white paper. So awareness, consideration, decision, picking the right format for the right stage in the journey. How is a white paper different from a blog post? Asks Lucy. Brilliant question. I really appreciate that, and welcome everybody. I can see a few friendly names there, a few people I don't know. Hey, Laura. Hi, Mark. So typically a blog post will be, we call it free to air. So it's publicly accessible. Whereas typically a white paper is gated behind a landing page or perhaps used in the sales process. Maybe you send it in an email. That's the first typical distinction. Free to access, gated in some way. Secondly, typically, although not always, typically a white paper exists as a slightly more tangible, independent entity, meaning usually it's a templated designed PDF document that you can download, print out, read on your Kindle, whatever, whereas a blog post you read on a blog. So those are the main distinctions that I can think about. Hopefully, Lucy, that answers your question. And if anyone else has questions, I love it. I love it if you ask questions. So please do that. It keeps me on my toes. Okay, let's move on. So here are some examples of white papers illustrating the design element. These are all things that we've written over the years. You can see they're quite high level. They're quite sort of business focused or outcomes focused. Obviously Sony is in this context selling office automation stuff like sort of meeting room booking tools and things like that. Trillion sells software that lets doctors communicate securely and things. So there's a product at the end of the rainbow for all of these, but these are just show it. These are the rainbow. These are the invitation to the party. Okay, so characteristics of a good white paper, if I haven't touched on this already, they have to be helpful and informative. They have to be useful, right? I mean, this is true actually for blog posts as well, but because you want to offer value, right? These days, your attention and your contact details are probably the 2 most valuable commodities any of us have online. So if you want to get people's attention, you have to say, if you download this piece of content, it's going to be really useful to you. A really good test of that is, would somebody pay for it? I mean, even if it was £1, right? You're giving it away for free, but would someone pay for it? And if the honest answer to that question is no, it probably shouldn't be a gated white paper. It should be something else. And one of the most common things I see is clients who want to turn case studies into white papers, right? They think that case studies are so interesting to potential customers that they will disclose their information, fill in their details, give their phone number, email address to get the case study. No, case studies are either used at the very end of the sales process to kind of show, hey, we know how to do this. We've done it before, and we've done it for companies like you. Great. You don't need to gate those. They're not lead capture of things. Or they're published on your blog as an opportunity to show publicly, hey, we can do all this stuff. We're very clever. Or if not on a blog, maybe on a case studies page. Right, so helpful and informative. It's also very important, although you have an obvious bias or opinion or philosophy that you're communicating, that the white paper is credible. Because if the rest of the white paper is credible, the bit about you is also going to be credible. If the rest of the white paper is BS, the bit that says we're brilliant is also going to feel like BS. And people are used to reading good quality content, right? People read newspapers, magazines, they know what good looks like. So you kind of need to be up at that level of authority. And while you can be aware of alternatives, like, we're a marketing agency, hire a marketing agency, but we also know people want to hire in-house marketers. That's a reasonable awareness of the alternatives. And you can react to those alternatives. It looks, in my view, very naive to pretend that there is no alternative to hiring a marketing agency. There is no alternative. You must hire us. But, okay, and always context. So it's not selling the product, it's selling the context around the product. In this way, white papers are different from sales collaterals. They're different from one-pagers. They're different from product literature. They're different from the static pages on your website that talk about your products and services. Those have a really important place. I'm no way am I saying don't do that stuff. I'm saying white papers are not those things. So the goal for a white paper is always be helping. And the goal for sales collateral is overcome objections, convince people, get them to take the next step, always be closing. They have different intentions. And I think touches on the sort of point of objectivity, and sometimes we use the word truthiness. I think the more you can respect the reader's position and the reality of their choices and the reality of the issues they face, I think the more chance you have of being credible and authoritative. So, you can be objective and still put the best foot forward for your opinion or philosophy, especially if you make it clear where that is. So there are design things you can do. You can put, the articulate opinion in a sidebar, or about articulate below the line as a sort of byline. You can sort of differentiate visually between editorial and advertorial, between church and state. Okay, I think I made my point there. So let's move on. So you then have to pick the right format. So I'm going to do a little run through of different types of white paper formats, and then I'm going to give you some tips about writing really credible, exciting white papers. So first sort is, sorry for the French, I'm sorry for the mangled pronunciation, a tour d'horizon. So you're looking around at the landscape. A really good example of this, we used to write Symantec's annual Internet Security Threat Report. That is 30, 40-page mighty tome of internet security stuff. And, basically you read it and you find out what the security landscape looks like at that time. So it's positioning Symantec as an expert, but it's not anywhere in there really talking about products. Maybe a little bit at the end, but it's mostly positioning the company. This is, if you've got expertise, this is a very good format for that, right? So you can write a white paper. I mean, if you're selling software into the property management sector, you can write white papers about the impact of IT changes and remote working for the property management sector. And you're a bit of that. You have a platform to talk about it, but you're looking at the whole thing from your vantage point, from your perspective. Next format. This is a little bit more of a persuasive format where you're trying to build a logical argument. So this is the inverted pyramid. There's a really good book called The Pyramid Principle by Barbara Minto. You really only need to read the first third of it, right? It gets quite labored and tedious towards the end. The key point is this structure of situation, complication, question, and answer allows you to build up a very credible sort of logical flow. And she used to be an editor at it wasn't McKinsey, but it was a sort of McKinsey-like management consultancy, I forget which. And of course, what they're trying to do all the time is persuade people to a course of action. How do you do that? Also, Google SciPab, SCIPAB, it's a similar sort of format for perhaps expressing problems and solutions. So this is a little snapshot of a very old piece that one of my former and soon to be again colleagues, she's rejoining the company in January, wrote. So here is the current situation. Digital transformation is a thing. Lots of people are doing digital transformation, but there's the complication. IT problems, IT management, digital risk, and there is new business models is the beginning to point to the answer, and the message is clear. If you want to build tall digital businesses, you better make sure the foundations are strong. And the rest of the piece talks about foundations. This was a 3,000-4,000 word piece about digital infrastructure and security. But that's a really, really nice example of this situation, complication, question and answer. And looking at it now after 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years, I guess, I still think it's very, very good example, very good, well written. Okay, next thing, slightly simpler version of the inverted pyramid. It's just define the problem, make a recommendation in a general sense, and then present your product in that context. So this is an old white paper we did for Pensar years ago. 5 ways marketing agencies can prove compliance, security compliance in bid processes. So, you've got to do various things, and this is a problem for some marketing agencies. And this is how you solve it. Well, 3/4 of that piece has nothing to do with Pensar. It's all talking to a problem that marketing agencies have. I mean, when we work for Microsoft or Dell, they want us to do all kinds of audits and checks and prove that we're secure. This is the thing that tells you how to do it. So this is a very simple format. This is probably closest to product that I think a white paper should get. Listicles, we all know what a listicle looks like. Productivity tools for marketing agencies. It has almost nothing to do with Pensar. It was an IT company we used to work with, but they're very easy to write. They have a very high perceived value. And if in doubt, write a listicle, or write a listicle sandwich. What's a listicle sandwich? Okay, so you start with a slightly more editorial approach, a little tour d'horizon or problem statement. And in the case of this work that we did for Red Pixie back in 2018, the problem is Excel is incredibly powerful, but it has limitations. It has particularly limitations for insurance companies running really, really, really big risk models that take 8 hours to calculate. So in there, we're talking about power users and power user tricks and things that Excel users need to do. So all talking to the reader about their issues in their language. One of the things that we're offering in this listicle of, we've defined the problem at the beginning, there's the opening of the sandwich, then we've given it a whole list of things that you can do to make Excel better, faster, quicker, more usable, whatever, better visualization. And then the other side of the sandwich is, and we also have this thing called a zero calculation engine that can do Excel calculations in the cloud. So, there's the listicle sandwich, right? The listicle's in the middle, there's a top and a tail. Okay. Benchmarking is a very good format, a little bit more challenging because you have to do some research, you have to do some surveys, you have to do some analysis. But if you can say to a reader, download this white paper and you can find out how good you are. It's the equivalent of, one of these sort of men's health, are you normal kind of quizzes, or Cosmo quizzes, if we want to be sort of non-gendered about it. We did one for Google where we looked at the Deloitte Fast 50, all the companies that were in there. And we then, because Google knew which of those companies was using Google Apps, and we sort of cross-correlated that. And then we did interviews with the CIOs at the companies that were using it and produced a report. So, correlating ambitious fast growth with use of Google Apps. This was a long time ago. Sorry, Microsoft, we love you really. Okay, so this is kind of a good format, but it takes a lot of work. And this is the sort of format that a lot of our clients would like us to write without having any of the resources or budget to pay for the analysis and research. Indeed, later today, I'm grappling with how to produce something like this without any input from the client and without any data. So, it's challenging sometimes for us to write, but if done well, it can be really powerful. Okay, checklists. Our most popular content, I think, is on Articulate, is our proofreading checklist. And it is literally a 1-page asset. So it's really short, really simple, but it is something that we have used. We have a slightly different approach to that stuff now, but we share it publicly and people download it. We've done checklists for GDPR compliance. That was hugely successful for the client we did that for. We've done checklists for other things. So, again, needs a little bit of expertise, a little bit of input in order to make the value real and make sure it's not just trivial. But sharing a checklist can be very powerful. Similarly, sharing playbooks and templates. So probably the second most successful offer we ever did for a client was an IT security policy template. So 10 pages of IT security policy text, just insert your company name here, and do you want this, sort of a list of sort of optional things that you could delete or include. For the kinds of SMBs, small businesses that this company was working with, they didn't have a security policy, and having this shortcut it, I don't know, 2 or 3 days of work. I know because it was our IT security policy to start with, and it took me 2 or 3 days to write it. So, high value asset. Okay. So in the last few minutes of this talk, I'm going to share some tips. I've got 3 or 4 slides here. Please do ask me all questions if you want. It's fun if you do that. Okay, so I'm assuming you've done your research. You've got something interesting to say. You know who your personas are. You've got your tone of voice. You've got your positioning. You've got your messaging, and you've picked the right format. If any of these things are not true, I've got other webinars about this stuff. I know a very good marketing agency that can help you pin all this down. So this is sort of assumed. But that's tip number 1, have those things. The next thing, really, really important thing that I try and tell writers, if you just have a paragraph after paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, and it looks like a PhD thesis, it's going to be very hard for people to read, for people to navigate, and you need to make the structure visible. So you want scannable copy, go search how people read online on the Norman Nielsen Group website, Norman Nielsen. Anyway, nngroup.com, how people read online, to understand what I mean by scannable. I've also done talks about this. Put a really good title, put a stand first or an executive summary, use lots of subheadings, subtitles, put super titles, sidebars, pull quotes. Really, really, really signpost the piece. This is really important. Next tip. Tables. Tables are your friend for white papers. I can't emphasize this strongly enough. You can bring some structure, some visible structure to your thought processes by building a table. So, for example, different types of B2, something business to employee, business to consumer, business to data. This was pre-designed, but you suddenly see, oh, okay, I can see the different concepts that he's trying to communicate here, rather than it's just a paragraph and another paragraph and another paragraph. Really common formats for tables in white papers. You write sort of 2 or 3 pages of stuff, and then you have a table that says what we do in our product, how it helps, why it matters. So, we build swimming pools with tiles on the side, and that helps because it reduces the amount of cleaning and reduces the risk of damage. Therefore, it costs you less in the long term. So what we do, how it helps, why it matters. For some reason, I'm using swimming pools as an example today. It's the middle of winter. I can't even imagine why. Swimming pools. Okay. Common problem, what we do. So a table of, here are the 10, issues with remote working. Here are the 10 things that our solution helps you solve by when you buy it. Remote working, there's no documents. We do documents digitally online, therefore, Tables make compelling, credible content. Images, right? So we're visual people. So if you can illustrate what you're writing about with screenshots, ideally with diagrams and charts, infographic type elements. The challenge with that, at least as a marketing agency, is we are charging quite a lot of money to write the copy, put it in a template, build a landing page, do the email promotion, do the email follow-up, a case study, white paper campaign with all the lead capture stuff, probably the most expensive single element of work that we do. And if we then come along and say, well, okay, you want all that and you want us to do, effectively insert an infographic into that, which means more research and more design work and more interaction with the client. I think, and we've had this recently with a couple of clients, people will see these white papers produced really effectively by multinationals like McKinsey or something, and they look amazing. Why? Because these people have got teams of researchers writing and researching and putting the data together, and they've got teams of designers doing the thing. We're happy to do it, but it's not free. And it's not automatically included. And I don't know why I'm laboring this point, but I guess it's all point for something that happened recently. So if you can't put a lot of illustration in, at least you can use illustration elements for like icons or for breaking up the chunks or doing sort of nice design on the tables or something. A little bit of design goes a long way. A little bit of illustration goes a long way, especially if it supports the structure and communicates, clarifies the messaging. For most of our clients, being in the world of software, screenshots are pretty cheap to produce, and I think they're the best option. Okay. I think this is the last slide, but for credibility, impact, a white paper wants to look like something substantial, right? Which is why when you go to a lot of landing pages, they've got these sort of 3D, page turning, it's a book type of artwork to show you, you're not just getting like a piece of text, you're getting a book, an ebook, a report, a white paper, a thing, right? Tangible value. But also you want to support the credibility of what you're doing by making it look valuable. I think the worst thing that can happen is you download, you fill in the form and you get something that's flimsy and insubstantial and badly formatted or something like that. So the design is quite important. So you want things like a cover, you want a table of contents, you want page numbers, you want that little thing at the end that says, about Articulate, we are blah, 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 blah. Right. So that kind of stuff adds weight and credibility. So that brings us almost to the end today. If anybody watching this would like to have a conversation with me about white paper, I keep saying case studies, about white papers, I would be delighted. As you can tell, I can bore for England about the subject. I've written so many and I train people about how to write them. So very happy to have that conversation. My email details are here. My meeting link is here. You can book up a time to talk to me. It would be my great pleasure. But for now, this is, I think, the last webinar before Christmas. So happy holidays, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.